Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the ministerial screening of the nominees. 43 names sent by Mr. President to this chamber, and out of the 43, 31 have been screened so far, which means that we have 12 more ministerial nominees to be screened by the 9th Senate. Starting off today will be Mr. Babatunde Fashola, whose screening is actually one that a lot of people have been looking forward to. We're looking forward to the questions that he will be asked this morning, and how he would be answering those questions. Remember, he's a returning minister, former Minister of Power Works and Housing, and of course a very vocal supporter of the Buhari administration. A lot of questions will be asked him today, we were told earlier, around his successes during his time as minister.
The screening of the ministerial nominees will continue, and this morning we have on the podium the former Honourable Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Honourable Minister, let me welcome you to the Senate chamber on behalf of my colleagues. You are welcome to this screening exercise, and we already have copies of your CV. I can go ahead to highlight those things in the CV that you think are so significant for the Senate to take note of, and even those that you might have not included in the CV but will be of consequence and significance. Once again, you are welcome, and you can address the Senate. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the President of the Senate, Your Excellency, the Deputy President of the Senate, principal office holders of the Senate, distinguished senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and most especially the senators from the Center of Excellence, the state of Lagos, my state. Good morning. And let me start by saying that I feel humbled and grateful to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for considering me worthy of re-nomination amongst 43 people in a federation of several hundreds of millions of people. For me, it is humbling, as I've said, and it imposes a sense of immense responsibility that should you confirm me, the purpose for which the office will be meant will only be to serve the people of Nigeria. And in that sense, the only useful contribution I can make to the documents already before you are to highlight some of the work that we undertook in the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing. And I say we because at the inception of that ministry, we were 2 ministers, and in the course of service, we became 3. Let me say, without being immodest, that from what we inherited when we took office after your prior confirmation in 2015, we left the ministry much better than we met it. And I believe that those conclusions are borne out by reports of the committees of this Senate on Power, Works and Housing in their oversight functions in the course of our tenure. I will highlight a few things that we did that I think are worthy of information, just to iterate them for this Senate and also for the people of Nigeria, and to benchmark what has been done as we set out on another journey of service to Nigerians. In the power sector, for instance, we set out to achieve initially incremental power with a mid-term goal of steady power and ultimately uninterrupted power. We focus essentially on completing what we inherited, and this led us, for example, to recovering 720 containers belonging to the Federal Republic of Nigeria containing transmission equipment that had been left at the Nigerian port for almost a decade. Those equipment ultimately found their way to over 100 substations across the country, and we have completed some of them by the time I left office. And I remember some notable ones like in Sokoto, in Mayobewa, in Ikurudu, in Ikotekpene, in Katankpe, in Akpo, to mention a few. I also remember that whilst we were managing the grid, we changed Nigeria's conversation from on-grid power alone to off-grid power. And for the first time, as far as I can recollect, Nigerians are now talking about and benefiting from off-grid power. A few examples are markets like Ari, Sura, markets in Ibadan, markets in Ondo, and by the time I left the ministry, we had set out a clear roadmap for 350 markets as a full implementation initiative for this term. I will also speak to universities very briefly. We also undertook the power audit of 37 federal universities in Nigeria with a plan to intervene and strategically deploy independent power to Nigeria's federal universities as our contribution to education development, which is a four-burner issue for the country. By the time I left, based on the limited resources we had commenced 9 as a first phase, and all those 9 are in various stages of implementation at the moment. I can say with some authority that from next month, I think it is Ndufwe Alike University, if I pronounce that correct, in Ebonyi State, will be the first to switch on. It is a project that has 3,500 solar panels. It has installed 18 kilometers of street lighting in that university, and that will be the first to be commissioned, I think, sometime next month. And from then on, between the end of the year and March 2020, the first phase of the 9 will be fully operational for dedicated power in our schools. I will quickly move, if you permit me, sir, to works. And to just say that the conversation before the last administration were conversations of lack of projects in various states of the Federation. I think our closing report was that we could say with some pride that there was no state in the Federal Republic of Nigeria where we were not executing at least one federal road. No state. Resources were scarce. There was a lot of demand. With the cooperation of Parliament, the National Assembly, we got things going even when revenues were lean. That forced us to make choices. And in making choices, we decided to see how we could do the greatest good to the greatest possible number of Nigerians. And one of the things that we did was to categorize roads, I believe, into 7 categories. Starting first with roads that carried the heaviest traffic. These were roads like Ilorin-Jeba, Abuja, Kaduna, Lagos, Ibadan, Enugu, Port Harcourt Road, Sokoto, Tambuwa, Jega Road, Kano, Maiduguri Road, and so on and so forth. We also had roads that decongested and provided access to ports. So there were roads, Enugu-Port Harcourt Road fell into that category. The Apapa, Oshodi, Urushoki fell into that category. We had roads to our fuel depots across the country. One example of that was the Suleja Mina Road. We also had roads that evacuated goods from agricultural prolific areas. So roads like Adeja, Hunguru, Kirikasama to Hunguru, roads in Ebonyi and such other roads were strategically targeted to evacuate agro-produce. We also, of course, targeted roads that were being funded by counterpart funding. And because this had been a problem, they were never budgeted for, they were not prioritized. And because of our strategy, I can say now that we have successfully, with your cooperation, started roads like the roads linking us to Cameroon, from the Enugu-Onitsha, to link us to Cameroon through a bridge. The Akwanga-Kefi road is one of those roads as well. We also started the prioritization of repair and maintenance of bridges nationwide. And the Tamburawa Bridge, I believe, in Kano, the Isaac-Boro Bridge in Rivers, the Third Mainland Bridge in Lagos, the Tatabu Bridge, I believe, in Niger, were some of the bridges that benefited from our strategic outlook as to how to proceed with limited resources. Perhaps the last one was roads inside universities. Our universities had been left for a long time without attending to the roads. And at the time I left, we were intervening in 14 universities, building their internal road network. Lastly, I would just say in terms of housing, that at the time we left office, we were constructing houses in 34 states of the Federation. And for those who might ask, why not 36? It was that we did not get land at the time, in quick enough time, from 2 states. But I believe work is going on to make those lands available now. And the 34 states, including the FCT, if I must emphasize. But what were we building? We were building a model, we were trying to model an acceptable and affordable type of house for Nigerians. We had learned from the experiences of the 70s. We saw that some of the national housing programs had not been occupied, and we then conducted a national survey using builders and architects from different parts of the country to go around Nigeria and tell us what Nigerians would find acceptable and affordable. The results showed that while the northern part of the country preferred bungalows with courtyards at the back, and were suitable for that because of the large expanse of land that was available, the southern part was largely a demand for flats, but whether it was bungalows or whether it was blocks of flats, there was a consensus about taking 1, 2, and 3 bedroom flats. By the time I left, we had finished quite a few. We were also working on infrastructure, the mechanical and electrical part. We were also learning from the model we were designing, because we then saw that the build-out cost was excessive and likely to be unaffordable by Nigerians. And we were making corrections in terms of some places, reducing concrete without compromising standards and quality. Your Excellency, President of the Senate, I think this is an appropriate place perhaps to just stop and take questions as may arise, and perhaps the opportunity to clarify some things might come during that process. I thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much. Senator Biobara Kumadeji.
It was profound pleasure, Mr. President of the Senate, well seated as the chair, most distinguished colleagues. Chair, thank you for the privilege of allowing me to take the first shot. Mr. Nominee, I used to be one of your silent, quiet admirers in your days as governor of Lagos State, when you took over from our leader, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and you continued with the urban renewal programs of Lagos State. I want to congratulate you on your renomination as a ministerial nominee by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I wish you good luck. I'm confident that you will do well. Mr. Nominee, I also think, and I won't be surprised, that if you are successfully confirmed by the Senate, you may likely be reappointed and be deployed to your former ministry. In the event that that happens, I want to raise two questions and maybe clarifications from you, sir. You talked about the criteria used for the choice of projects for execution based on scarce resources. Mr. Nominee, I know that that choice is also based on the critical economic importance of these roads. I just want to know if Eleme Port Harcourt Road leading to Port Harcourt Refinery is not part of the roads that are considered very critical in your choice of roads to be executed in the country. Because this road, Mr. Nominee, as you know, leads to the refinery, and you can imagine the number of trucks and vehicles that ply that road. It is perennially under deplorable condition, that road, as you know. And even as I speak to you, if you pass through that road, it's an eyesore. Sometimes the state government also intervenes. Mr. Nominee, I think it is important to know, why that road is not part of your consideration. The second one, still on roads. You are also aware that the road leading from Kolo, Yenezwe, Kolo, Nembe Road, passing through the first commercial oil field in this country, the Oloibiri axis leading to Nembe to Brass. Brass is an export terminal of crude oil. And from 1974 till date, that road is under construction. I just want to also know why your choice of projects, particularly the road projects, that road is not considered. I know you are a very strong man. You are committed, a focused person. You perform very well. But this particular road has not been given attention. That is on roads. Secondly, no, it's on road. No, this is the second one. I should be protected now.
Distinguished Senator Degi, we have set some rules for ourselves. And one of them is a maximum of 2 questions per person, so that we allow others. And I can tell you I have about 28 senators who want to ask questions. So I will even advise that no preamble, no introduction. Go straight to your question, so that we're able to take as many senators as possible. Senator Ike Ikwaramadu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues. Mr. Nominee, I'll start by congratulating you on your renomination, and also to thank you for your commitment to the development of not just Lagos where we are governor, but also for our country as a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I just have two questions. You recall, Mr. Nominee, that I had a conversation with you when we were appointed last regarding the issue of private sector participation in the road sector development. And one of the challenges at the time, according to you, was the complex nature of the procurement process for that kind of arrangement. And you promised that you are going to find a way of simplifying it. But 4 years down the line, we ended up still pursuing the issue of appropriation as the sole item in the road sector development. Is this something you think that we can achieve as quickly as possible? Because as it is today, it's almost unlikely going to be difficult for us to achieve our maximum expectation in the road sector by just yearly appropriation. So do you think that there's something we can do to fast-track the process and get the private sector involved and be able so that they can be able to recover their money through a very transparent process? The second is in the energy sector. It appears to me that we're not making so much progress in that regard. And would you like to consider a situation where we unbundle the energy sector or segment it in such a way that states or zones will be able to have independent generation, transmission, and distribution, so that we'll be able to have some level of efficiency? Because the present national grid we have doesn't seem to be working. Because once we have a failure in one place, it affects every other place. So Nigeria, as large as it is, would you like to consider a situation where we'll be able to segment our energy sector for purposes of efficiency?
Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. Well, congratulations for your second nomination. My question is that recently it appears, or we learned, that the federal government has concluded some arrangements, some agreements with Siemens of Germany, to participate, in the power sector. Can you inform the Senate what kind of agreement is it? At what point do you expect this intervention to take place? And do you expect, secondly, this intervention will not affect the kind of agreements that federal government entered with the private sector people in the power value chain?
Senator Ibrahim Hassan Hadeja.
Thank you very much, Senate President, my colleagues. The nominee, I have just one question, and it's with regard to on-grid solar. As you are aware, over the last 4 years, there have been a lot of activity towards actualizing on-grid solar investment. And in particular, I think there were about almost 14 projects or so at various stages of financial close until I think sometime in 2018, the ERGP selected 4. I think 2 are in my state, Jigawa, it was Bauchi and Katsina. And in my own experience, I've been to your office several times, was very, very frustrating. We had investors that had come in, acquired land, done all the regulatory processes. Some of them had signed connection agreements with TCN, but the last mile, we came to the PCOA with MBET, became very frustrating. The issue was pricing. Prices dropped from 17 to 11.5 to 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And we got to a point where these guys were even saying, tell us how much you want to pay. But unfortunately, this was not achieved till you left office. My question, simply put, is are we going to have on-grid solar, you think, in the next 2-3 years? Because the last information I got was that we were reluctant to bring in solar power because we had issues with distribution and transmission. And my question is, what if we sort out these issues and the variables have changed? The land for solar might not be there, the investors might have moved on. So simply put, are we going to have on-grid solar, you think, in the next 2 or 3 years, since we all assume that you might end up superintending the power sector again? Thank you.
I will still encourage our colleagues to just go straight to the question. Senator Cecilia Folari, and then the nominee can respond.
Thank you, Mr. President. My highly respected colleagues. Mr. President, to the nominee, you talked about prioritizing roads, projects. Well, we find it very disappointing that such a strategic road like the Lagos-Ibadan Express hasn't been finished in 4 years. That's number one. Then number two, would you say you are overwhelmed supervising these 3 major ministries? Thank you.
You can respond.
Thank you, sir. Some of the questions have some generic problems, like roads. So perhaps let me just say to the very first question about the Port Harcourt Road and perhaps Lagos-Ibadan. The common problem between them was always funding. There was never enough resources, and I made that clear in saying that we were then forced to make choices. Everybody wants something, and that is why we are all here in the federal government. Everybody wants development in his or her own state. And let us be mindful, distinguished senators, that at least in the last 3-4 years that I have been here, there is no year that we have not passed a deficit budget. And that simply meant that our resources were not enough to match and sufficiently fund our stated intended expenditure. And therefore, we have to borrow. And there's a large group of people who say we are over-borrowing. So, and as I said with regard to that road, we had to make choices. It wasn't that we didn't want to do it, but we had to choose. And to the extent, for example, that in that area, there was another project, the Bodo Boni Bridge, which had been left for a while. We felt that the commitment to that place at least will give us some opportunity to say we are doing something also in this area, because we are also mindful and sensitive to some equitable distribution of what assets, and the Kolo-Yenegua Road suffers the same problem, apart from community issues. At the time when I visited, there were some community issues that had delayed the project. With regard to PPPs, let me just quickly say that, as I said and acknowledged by distinguished Senator Kwemadu, PPPs are complex. They take time to negotiate. Even here in the federal government, you need to go through the ICRC, you need to advertise, you need to do. In a government that has 4 years to show results, and in a country where there is very, very high expectation for results, we must then be more skillful in how we use them. That said, let me also say that PPPs are not attractive for all projects. I have learned to distinguish between social projects like roads and commercial projects like airports, hospitals, and those kind of facilities where there is a daily cash count. And those are easier for private investors to want to put their money into than roads and the risk of construction that it requires. And so you will see that one of the things, and there are so many modes. One mode, of course, has been to take funding through special instruments like the Sukuk. That was a sort of PPP. To use policies like the Nigerian Tax Credit Initiative policy, which we are now using to build the Apapa-Urushoki Expressway, which Lafarge has also used to build the road to their factory in Calabar, and a couple of others are showing interest. And I think at the time I left, there were about 28 roads on the short list for the committee set up to review and hopefully approve for implementation. I have, in response to your question, what do I suggest? I think there is some opportunity, and I made this presentation during the last 2019 budget presentation, that one of the ways I think is to expand instruments like the Sukuk. Maybe it won't be a Sukuk this time, but I think Nigeria can seek to leverage from the large pool of funds with ordinary people who are looking for secure investments. And some of them are not even in the banking sector, keeping their cash. And I propose then that we should consider something like a 10 trillion naira infrastructure bond, backed by parliamentary support, and secured by the federal government with a reasonable coupon, issued in tranches each year we need to fund infrastructure, and broken up into even very small denominations that people can invest as much as only 1,000 naira. Those who want to invest 1 billion can do so, and so on. And in my view, if we don't try this, we won't know whether it has worked. But I am convinced that we can do something along this line based on the interest that I saw in the Sukuk. In 100 billion Sukuk, for example, there were 186 or 286 investors. And the instrument was oversubscribed, which meant that there was an appetite for it. And so I will make that suggestion, sir. The other way, of course, which the President has also used, is the Infrastructure Development Fund by the National Sovereign Investment Authority. And this is what is helping to fund the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway now, the second Niger Bridge, the Abuja-Kanu Highway, the East-West Road is listed there, and it is also to fund our counterpart funding, I think, for the 2019 budget for the Mambila Hydro project, but we're still waiting for the Chinese to approve the main loan. In terms of energy, well, I think the sector itself has already been unbundled. And I say this because, and I thank you for the question, because it provides an opportunity perhaps to reach out to more Nigerians to understand what has happened in that sector. When this National Assembly passed the 2005 Electric Power Sector Reform Act, it was a clear statement that the Nigerian people, through their elected representatives, were saying to government, get out of power. Let the private sector do it. That process led to, and before that process, the Ministry of Power then used to have over 50,000 staff as a ministry. And those were the men and women who manned all the power stations, they manned the transmission system, they manned the distribution companies that we now had, were manned by officials of the ministry seconded to them and posted accordingly. By the time this law was implemented and privatization took effect, the staff strength of the Ministry of Power that I inherited was about 790. And in the last budget defense that I presented to Senate, we were accounting for 699 staff. So the effect of that law was that the ministry had ceased to be an operator and by extension government. We didn't have trucks, we didn't have meters, we didn't have ladders, we didn't keep transformers anymore. That was now the business of private sector. By that law, the ministry was restricted to policy and directives. And the regulator was NERC, the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission. So they issued licenses, they could sanction the licenses for non-performance, not the ministry, not any of the ministers. That was clear by your law. Our role was to issue policy. So some of the things I've spoken to you about today were the result of some of the policies we made, recommendations we made, not only to the regulator, but also to our employer, the government. And let me also say, sir, that the Constitution as amended, I believe in Article 13, 14, and 15 of the second schedule, which is the concurrent list, clearly makes provision for states to participate in power, contrary to the wide-held belief that states cannot. And if I can paraphrase the provisions, it is something to the effect that states and state governments can generate their own power, transmit their own power, and distribute their own power where in places not covered by the national grid. And that is a lot of space for states to play. And they can also form their own state power authorities. The Constitution makes that very clear. But it is a space that I think some states have not occupied significantly enough. So, for clarity, sir, the regulator, NERC, just like if we want to know what is wrong with SIM cards, call drops, and all of that, we don't go to the Ministry of Communication. We go to NCC. If we want to know what is happening with banks, we don't go to the Ministry of Finance. We go to the Central Bank. That is the regulator. And it is the regulator that we must all support now to exercise the fullest powers that you have given the regulator. And there are a lot of powers there to act on behalf of all of us. And as I always say, I am a consumer myself. And that takes me to the question of solar projects, that I don't like solar projects. I have one in my house. I have on my roof. And so it is not true that I am reluctant, I don't like that. The truth about those 14 projects, sir, is that they were initiated by state governments before we came, and they required federal government to guarantee the purchase of the power. So it was a state government that would say, I want power, but federal government guaranteed that you will pay for it. That was the business model. There were so many problems that we resolved. But I think it is instructive to make the point, as you pointed out, sir, that the PCOA, which is the security document, is not a document issued by the Ministry of Power. It is a financing instrument issued by the Ministry of Finance. And they were asking for a foreign instrument, which meant that our Ministry of Finance had to go to the World Bank to say, we want this instrument for these projects. For want of a better word, I describe it as like asking for an insurance policy. So the World Bank, who issued the instrument, then said, well, your tariff agreed with these people is too high. We are doing tariffs for solar in Zambia, I think, at 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Yours is 11 cents. If they want our insurance, let them reduce the price. So it is not correct to say that we were the ones holding back. It was the price of the instrument that they wanted that they could not accommodate. We offered them a local security in Naira, because at the time when this issue took place, it was during the recession. And one of the points I made is that we can't give you a guarantee in dollars, but because we are short of dollars. But at the time until tomorrow, I don't think Nigeria will ever run out of Naira. I think just to emphasize that there is still hope that those projects will be done, but perhaps the business model may have to be looked at again. Because as I said, if you have authorized government to get out of power, why should government be the one buying the power? And that's a business model that I think we need to look at again. Just to say again for Lagos Ibadan and to PPPs, all of us are living witnesses to the fact that when a PPP was signed, for that project in 2006 or 2007, nothing really happened on that route until 2012, when the previous administration cancelled it. So that's the kind of delays you can have. So there was 5 years of no activity, really, of visible activity. When it was cancelled, then it became a court case. And the same is true of the second Niger Bridge. By the time I took office, the people who were supposed to be the concessionaires said they couldn't continue, that the economic variables had changed. The agreement they were looking at was 165 naira to $1, and that as 300 and something, it was no longer economically viable. They were asking then the federal government to say, look, the traffic count here cannot meet our financing expectations, so give us a guarantee in dollars if the traffic count falls short. And I refused to recommend that, and I recommended that the federal government should take over its projects and continue. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, I can say that I am happy that my recommendations were accepted. The piling works on the bridge have now been completed, and as we get into dry season now, some more progress should be made. Thank you, sir.
Senator, Deputy Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions for the nominee. One, Mr. Nominee, Leonard SAN Raji Fashola, whether you have any reason for the neglect of the EB Bridge, which is a long-standing project. Year in, year out, we see allocation and yet nothing done. And it is a bridge that links, I think, Plateau, Nasarawa, a larger part of the Middle Belt to the Trunk A road that links Maiduguri to the southeast. What is the reason for this neglect? And number two, you are listening carefully to your submission before questions. You said all 36 states of the Federation, none, has no project from your ministry. I am from Taraba State, and I know the only project from Federal Ministry of Works, road project, is the one that I brought as a constituency project. But even then, money allocated for the road had been diverted. Is there one road that you are doing in Taraba that is not known to me? Thank you.
Senator Comrade Patrick Abomoro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the privilege to ask these few questions. Mr. Nominee, you were minister in the Ministry of Works, Power, Housing, and some concerns have been voiced in recent times concerning infrastructural deficits across Nigeria. As a former minister, immediate past minister, in charge of these facilities, are you happy and satisfied? In one, the permanent state of ongoing projects like the Abuja-Lokoja Road, the Loko-Oweto Bridge and Roads, and the second Niger Bridge, to mention very few. Secondly, can you, in all honesty, tell Nigerians now what you are going to do different if perchance you are confirmed and posted to the same ministry to stabilize light, to enable Nigeria celebrate at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months of uninterrupted electricity, just like other countries have recently celebrated 50 years of uninterrupted electricity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Aidi Gyang.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sitting as chair, Committee of the Whole. Mr. Minister Nominee, I want to say that, to congratulate you, and to say that one thing that is condition precedent for the long-awaited developmental and economic breakthrough of our nation at the national and subnational level has to do with infrastructure, and in particular roads and power. And the nation entrusted you with that responsibility for the past 4 years. And the President has again seen the need to reappoint you. Should you be reassigned to that same ministry, your attention would be brought to the critical artery of the road linking Akwanga, Jos, and Bauchi to the northeast, that is a critical national artery. And also, the one linking Jos and Zaria is very, very important. Secondly, in the housing aspect, would you subscribe to this very strong opinion that the issue of the displacement of people that have been affected by violence and banditry that has to do with their resettlement should be incorporated into the housing policy in a way that provision will be made for the rebuilding of those communities as part of the process of healing the processes of the communities that have been affected and traumatized by this violence. Thank you.
Senator Yusuf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues. I want to congratulate the nominee for coming for the second time. But my questions are, I am from Mambila, Taraba State, and Senator representing Taraba Central. I have two questions, sir. One question is, you said the international challenge for delaying the progress of Mambila is actually the processing or the slow processing of the Chinese loan. Now, what is the local challenge? Because what is the local challenge that is delaying the Mambila electricity project? I know it was awarded in August 2017, contract signed in November 2017, and today is about 2 years down the line, and my people are agitated. What is happening to the progress of this project? That's question number one. Number two, sir. Taraba Central is the only senatorial district in Nigeria which is not connected to national grid. What is it that is delaying the hooking of Mambila, of Taraba Central to the national grid? Thank you very much.
Senator Rocha Sokorocha. Distinguished colleagues, I have 40 names. So if we can be generous enough to ask only a question per person, so that everyone can go around.
Mr. Senate President sitting as the chair, I think I should rather be standing up so you can see me better. Mr. Raji Fashola Tunde, my good friend, my colleague, you're a good man, sound, no doubt about it.
Allow him now. Go ahead.
You have all eulogized your colleagues as senators. Let me eulogize my colleague as a governor, one-time governor of this.
My governor.
My governor. You're on the right side.
Now, Mr. Nominee, I know you are someone that thinks outside the box. But from all I have heard so far, excellent presentation, just like many other great people have spoken. My question here is that considering your experience for the past 4 years as an honorable minister of this critical sector of our economy, infrastructure, power, housing, works, which, if summed together, these are the key infrastructures that determines a nation's development. In the first place, I would have expected that the three ministries is too large to be handled by just one person. And look at my friend now, having gray hair at a very young age. So my question would be, my friend, there's one silent point here which I want you to address. Issue of funding. Because this will amount to an academic exercise if there's no money for you to perform. My colleagues who have spoken before me have mentioned the number of roads. I don't want to talk about Imo, that had only 5 kilometers of road from federal government, the airport road, and about 4 kilometers have been done or something. The question is, how do you want to address this issue of funding? Would you, and let me give a leeway to it, would you, because I think in Nigeria, we are cutting our coat according to material available, a size, not according to material available. And if we keep cutting our coat according to our size, the material cannot cover it. The entire budget of this National Assembly is not up to the budget of the Fire Department of New York. And here the question is the funding. What will be the new thing you tell Nigerians as to the issue of funding? And if funding, how much do you really require to tackle the issue of power in Nigeria? How much is required? And issue of discourse. Would you say discourse is a success story, or was it a political roundabout? Thank you.
Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar.
Mr. President, sitting as chair of the Committee of the Whole, my distinguished colleagues, I am Sadiq Suleiman Umar, representing the good people of Kwara Nat. Mr. Nominee, congratulations for your nomination. I have a very simple question, and this has to do with regulation. Regulation of goods and services. Mr. Nominee, the regulation in any country determines how anybody, the citizens, and in fact other countries, takes a country serious. In Nigeria, what is your opinion as regards what is responsible for suboptimal performance for our regulatory agencies and the regulatory professional bodies? And again, what will you say we need to do to push them in the right path so that, we can put behind us all this building collapse, poor, substandard, adulterated drugs, name it, all these problems. What will you say? What do we need to do? Because the activities of regulators is directly proportional to how citizens take a government serious, how they will be committed to the country, and how indeed other countries will take us serious. Thank you.
Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sitting as chair, I'm Dr. Aliu Sabi Abdullahi. I represent the good people of Niger North Senatorial District and from Niger State. Permit me to align myself with other speakers in congratulating you for this second nomination. My question is, there is a submission that the present procurement system in Nigeria is serving as a clock to the wheel of progress in executing government projects or contracts. And it is also said that it does not favor our indigenous companies in the construction industry, and in particular,
small and medium enterprises are not getting a good bargain because of the very many qualifications. What would be your take with respect to this? Secondly, I'm from Niger State, and Niger State has over 2,165 kilometers of federal roads, which means if you are coming from the north to the south or vice versa, you are bound to encounter a road in Niger State. And because of the heavy traffic, currently I don't think Niger State has any 100 kilometers of stretch of road that is very much removed. I know you've made so much effort, but if we are by chance taken back to this ministry, what will you be doing differently that the very good people of Niger will feel very happy that that story of the blind man who says we are in Niger simply because he has had the gallop of the road, he will say yes, we are now in Niger State because of the peculiar nature of Niger roads. What will you be saying differently so that our people will have that hope that the Birnin-Gwari road to Tegina and to Makera and the like will come back to life? Because these roads have been completely abandoned now. That is why the Mokwa-Bida road coming through to Suleja is now the main road people take. That itself is also suffering from a lot of pressure. So what will you be doing differently so that we don't end up losing all the roads that will take us to our various constituencies? Thank you.
Senator Francis Ali McKenna, then Senator Danjuma Goji.
Mr. Nominee, I have two questions for you. For the past 4 years now as a Minister of Works, what have you been doing about this Obiagana-Okene Road, Okene-Auchi Ekoma? And this road, money have been budgeted year in, year out, every year. And if you come back again as a minister on this road, what are we going to do about this road? Right now, the road is not passable, especially Okene to Auchi. There is fund. They budget money on this road year in, year out. Then you talk about this second question on housing. Money was budgeted for the housing as well. For the past 4 years, your ministry never commissioned any project, any housing project. I didn't see anyone. And if you have done anyone in any state, I have not done anyone in Edo, what are you going to do? What happened to this fund that was released to you for housing? The third one is not just an advice. No. Just
Yes. Senator Danjuma Goji.
Thank you, Mr. President, the Chair. I am Mohammed Danjuma Goje, representing Gombe Central. Your Excellency, Mr. Nominee, right now, as you know, there are hundreds of roads littered across the country. Some have been there, have been ongoing, sometimes abandoned for 2-3 years, then work resumes, then work is abandoned. To the extent that there are so many roads that have been awarded by the Ministry of Works, but you hardly, throughout the year, you hardly hear or see either Mr. President or the Minister of Works commissioning a fully completed road. Most roads are ongoing, every year ongoing, every year ongoing. You know, in private, I've discussed with you on this issue on about 2 or 3 occasions. I say, is there no way, Mr. Nominee, if you go back, that you can categorize these roads and to categorizing them, make sure each part of this country benefits? Because it's very, very important. You should not be categorized in favor of one section of the country or another, but in a way that every year you complete some roads. 2, 3, 4, where Mr. President will go, or you will go, or somebody will go on commission so that they will be put to use. But it doesn't make sense unless you have better reasons to tell us now. Whereby every year we keep awarding new roads, new, and they are all ongoing, always, perpetually ongoing. Is there no way you can stop this so that we can, at least every year, someone will be fully commissioned and completed? That's question number one. My second question is to do with power. Mr. Nominee, you know that the power reform effected by the federal government is with a view to giving stable electricity to Nigeria. Somehow, every day we hear of complaints from the GENCOs, no payment, that they are being owed billions and billions of naira. You hear of discourse complaining that they don't have money, and hear of story where discourse don't invest in transformers to the extent that now these days communities buy their own transformers. Or we in the National Assembly, through our constituency projects, also buy transformers to our various communities, which should not be the case. It should have been a responsibility of the discourse. Now, in your opinion, do you think this present reform which has been effected, whereby generation and distribution have been privatized, only transmission is retained by government, do you think going by this arrangement we can ever achieve, without prejudice to the Siemens arrangement with the federal government, we will ever achieve stable power supply in this country? Thank you very much.
You can respond now.
Thank you, Your Excellency. If you permit me, I will take the questions in reverse order. There are some that bear similarities, and maybe for want of time, let me just say that in some other, so starting with Senator Danjuma Goje's question, in some other jurisdictions, government has decided to hold the retail end, which is DISCO. So in some places, they have decided to hold the generation. We chose to hold the transmission. And so there's really nothing wrong in what model you choose. I have alluded here earlier, sir, to the powers of the regulator. Let me speak to two powers that the regulator has in, I think, sections 73, 74, and 75 of the Electric Power Sector Reform Act. On the complaint of a consumer or another licensee, and DISCOs, GENCOs, and TCN are licensees, that any licensee is not carrying out his function properly. One of the powers that was vested by that law in the regulator NEC is to undertake an investigation and do one of several things, including amending the license of that licensee or even cancelling the license. As we have seen in cases like the Central Bank, and as we have seen in some cases with the NCC, as we have seen with the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission. So the powers of the regulator for making the reform work must be targeted towards ensuring that minimum service levels, licensing conditions are met. And until we fully exhaust those powers, it will be premature to say that the reform is not working. But oftentimes when we privatize things, who goes back to check the service level compliance? Who pulls a lever of caution or compulsion, as the case may be, for us? And I think that is something all of us should spend some time to look at. The South African model, for example, with which we have sometimes spoken, sadly, in derogatory nature about our nation, is not perfect. It is indebted massively. It continues to benefit from government funding. Now, In the discos, for example, government is a holder of 40% of the shares of discos. And it holds 40% on behalf of the federal government, the states, the local governments, and the labor unions. So as a shareholder, it must also invest. And I think that is my understanding of the Siemens intervention, which was spoken about by one of your distinguished colleagues, and I want to take them together just to say that at this time, whatever investments is coming through Siemens will have to be worked into the existing arrangements. But I was not around when that agreement was concluded, so I can't speak here to the final details of what it contains because I have not yet read it. About commissioning roads, I'm happy Distinguished Senator Danjuma Goje brought this up in the open. These were discussions we have had privately because I approached him as chairman of Appropriation Committee, and that if the decision were mine, and I've made this recommendation in the Federal Executive Council, that if the decision were mine to make, as I once did when I was in Lagos, that there will be a year or 2 years where there will be no new projects. And if we can come to that as a nation, and this is the challenge of liberal democracy, really, how to build consensus amongst all of the eminent men and women who are representing various parts of the country with a mandate to bring home development. But if we can have consensus about this and say this year, let us have no new projects, let us prioritize. We can't have everything we want at the same time. So if, for example, all of these distinguished senators from the southeast, 3 from each state, will make the Enugu-Port Harcourt Road with the senators from Enugu, 18 of them, as their priority project. The Kanu-Maiduguri Road crosses about 7 states. You will have 21 or so senators saying, this is our commitment to all our people while we are here. And if we look at the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, serving 3 states, 9 senators there. The Ajeba-Andele or Bini serves Ogun, Ondo, Edo State, and so on and so forth. We can begin to have consensus about our priorities. We cannot do all of what we want at once. The life of a nation cannot be dealt with in more than 4 years. It requires more than 4. It's a going concern. So those would be my broad recommendations that I am willing to take up at a more auspicious and time-permitting forum. But I think that they may provide a way forward. And I think, in a sense, I have answered what distinguished Senator Francis Ali McKenna alluded to, except to provide some clarification. Some sections of that Benin Okene Aochi route have actually been finished. The section from Benin to Azura and so on have been finished. The problematic section is the one that you mentioned. And the problem there is that there is currently no drain to take out water. It's a low water table area. So if we build as it currently is, the road will fail again. And so I have challenged our engineers, and they were working on a drainage solution with the contractor until I left office. So if we don't drain that place, it just will not happen. And what will we do differently? What we have done throughout rainy season and Christmas, when there's heavy traffic and flooding, is to at least make it motorable to ease the plight of commuters. And I think that you will acknowledge that this has happened repeatedly. We want to find a final solution. Let me say again that Niger State, distinguished Senator Sabi Abdullahi will agree that we have moved the needle a little bit. Again, problem, of course, is how much money will we get? Because it is one thing to make the budget, and I think it is common knowledge here that no ministry has received all of the resources for its budget. So, yes, we gladly announce Ministry of Power, Works and Housing has 500 billion naira budget, but we seldom get more than 250, 280 at peak. So, Nigeria is not yet the rich nation that I know that it will be. It isn't yet. So, there's a gap between our anticipated spending and what we really earn. In terms of procurement, yes, I agree, and we have discussed this severally. There are many issues with the procurement system. It seeks, I think, to achieve value for money. Whether it has done that efficiently is debatable, but it also excludes some of the most vulnerable people in our society, small and medium and very basic people, people who want to pay children's school fees, who want to pay medical bills, people who want to pay their house rent. They want to benefit from the procurement, people you represent, that we represent, and they can't benefit because the conditions for benefiting are too onerous. So they have to bring all sorts of documents which they never have. So the cost of getting those documents becomes something that makes them unable to benefit. So we started a national maintenance infrastructure maintenance program. This is a process by which we seek to engage a lot of artisans, plumbers, welders, carpenters, bricklayers, R&A, refrigeration, heating, ventilation, and cooling practitioners. But I am afraid that as the procurement law presently stands, it is only the big people who will make more money, or who will get the contracts and then engage these people. So I have made the recommendations to many of the distinguished senators, and I hope that we will see a rescoping of that law. The expectation that have been expressed here also for projects to be completed on time are not compatible. Our expectation of speed is not compatible with what we have enacted in our law, where we have to first do a procurement plan. When you finish that, it gets approved, then you advertise it for 6 weeks, then there are thousands of bids, then we get human rights, civil society to come and witness everything, then after that, then there are petitions and so on and so on. It is not compatible with the speed at which we want to move. So our law is holding us back, and the law is made for us. We are not made for the law. And I hope that distinguished senators will rise up to this challenge and look at this as a matter of expedition. Let me Mr. President. Speak to regulation, because it is raised by distinguished Senator Omar. It's a very important point, and you will have heard me at some public fora speaking about the need to recruit some of the very best of our human capital into our public service. And I am developing a paper that I hope to share. But the answer simply is we need more professionalism within the regulatory bodies. Professionals must be able to hold themselves to the highest possible standards across board. And I think that if Nigeria's professional elite take up this responsibility, Nigeria will be a much better place. Distinguished Senator Okorocha, I think I have addressed the issues of funding while you stepped out, but the point to make again is to repeat what I said, that the budgets do not get full cash funding. Our budgets are deficit budgets, as you probably also will have experienced whilst in IMO. And therefore, we need to find more money. My recommendation was to suggest we raise an infrastructure bond where all Nigerians can contribute their small token. And let's see how far that takes us. We also are utilizing PPPs, but again, something like the tax credit initiative, people have not understood it sufficiently, and maybe I should say a word about it here. It is an advance credit of the company's income tax to government, an advance credit of his income tax. And therefore, for a company to benefit, so if you want to do a 10 billion naira road with your income tax paid in advance, it means first that you must make profit of an amount that equivalates or have a record of up to 10 billion. How many of our companies even turn over 10 billion before we begin to tax them? So that is a problem with that. But it has shown some appetite by some of the big players, and the room for more scope clearly exists. The question about what is holding Mambila, that's a very important question. Mambila has been in the front burner. I think that this administration can take credit for having been the one that finally issues a binding contract. There was never a binding contract on Mambila. All of the contracts, one thing was wrong, It didn't pass through FEC. It was somebody, there were court cases. This was the first time an EPC, Engineering, Procurement, and Construction contract, was issued. Now, having issued that contract, as I said, there is funding issue by the Chinese government, but there are also issues about now demarcating the precise area to coordinate, and we have employed surveyors to do that. FEC approved that memo, working with the Taraba state government to start that. We were awaiting their report when I left. That would then lead us to, after defining the territory, for example, if we wanted to build in this Senate, it may well be that the footprint of the project may not get to your seat. And so we have to enumerate all of the senators whose seats will be affected and who will be paid compensation and draw a boundary. And from there, of course, some advanced work is going on backstage that people will not see. But some progress has been made. There was a question about Taraba Central. I think from here, I'm not sure which part is Taraba Central now. Is it, I will come to it, sir. Is it close to Ukari, Takum area? Bali. Okay, I'm not quite sure, because I was going to bring your attention to the Kashimbila project, which we had neared completion of the transmission line now. And I think once that is commissioned, it is possible to extend its width to some parts of Taraba Central. The EB bridge, I think, and I have to be careful here, I know that it has cleared procurement. I am not sure, and I don't want to say, I can't recollect very clearly now, but I think that we awarded it in the Federal Executive Council. Well, the policy about displacing people and housing, I think is a very important and compassionate point. But I will support a policy along those lines. But let us remember that the federal government is not the one in control of land, and you can't build houses without land. It is the state governors and the state governments who control land. The models we have started with have actually proceeded on the basis of asking states to give us land as pilot projects. I think there was a question about, I think from Senator Gian, something about Akwanga, Jos Bauchi. I think that road has also, phase 1 of it has been awarded. Phase 2 is under procurement, and the financing approval will still have to come back to Parliament because it is funded by a Chinese loan. And I hope that when it does come, distinguished Senator Gian will give support to whoever the minister assigned to that ministry is to get the funding for it. But let me again say that between policy, implementation, and results, there is quite some distance that needs to be covered. And all of us, as leaders of government, must continue to carry this message to our people. But I think that Nigeria is making some progress. There's infrastructure deficit across the world, and none of the European countries now, the UK, the US, all of them are fighting about making big budgets to rebuild or renew their infrastructure. So we are not alone, but we have our work cut out for us, and I believe that it can be done. I think I will leave it there, sir. I think I've tried to summarize it. Thank you very much, sir.
Distinguished colleagues, I'm not surprised we still have 38 senators who would like, as a former Minister of Power, Works and Housing, I'm not surprised. But of course, time will not permit us. So I will call on the, let me be gender sensitive, only two, Senator Uche Lilian and Senator Elisha Ishaku-Abu.
Elisha is a man. He's a man. He's a man. Is that a woman? Elisha is a man. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, my name is Netuche Lilian Ekunife Iyom. Mr. President, I'm from Anambra State, representing Anambra Central. I have two questions, but one has been taken care of. So let me go to the one that concerns me directly with my constituents too. Congratulations, Honorable Minister. My question is this. The construction of Enugu-Awka-Onitsha Road has prolonged for too long. It's been there for too long. It has lingered for so much. I would like to know what is holding that road from being completed. Every year, a contractor will appear and disappear. If you go to the axis of Amobia, between Amobia and Umuogu, this is a journey that will take you just 3 minutes, but it will take you 1 hour. From Enugu to Onitsha will ordinarily take you 45 minutes, but now 3 hours, you're still on the same road. I went to represent Mr. President on Saturday on a function, a journey that would have taken me 40 minutes. I was there for 4.5 hours. I wanted to call Mr. President to send me a helicopter to lift me up. But unfortunately, network was bad too. So I would like to know, Honorable Minister, what are you going to do, first of all, to put palliatives on the road to ensure that at least road users will not continue to suffer, while the main job of completing the road would come? And I will also want you to tell us the actual story on that road, because that road has been there for years. Thank you very much.
Well, let me clarify the air, please. I should clear the air. When I said I was going to be gender sensitive, I meant to call a female senator and a male senator. So, Senator Abu.
Thank you so much, Mr. Senate President, sitting as the chair. My name is Senator Shiaku Abo, representing people of Adamawa North in the body of the Nigerian Senate. My question is just straightforward. As a very important voice, as a very important person whose voice is respected, as a very important person whose voice is respected at the Federal Executive Council, I want to know, sir, why in 2019 budget alone, the federal government budgeted over 107 billion naira for railways alone, and the Northeast was excluded, leaving only Maiduguri rail. Leaving out now economically viable place for towns like Mubi, which is actually the second biggest market in the whole of northern Nigeria after Kano State, and also the biggest cow market in the whole of West Africa, leaving it for only roads that are not so good. What is your plan, sir, of actually extending these railway lines to these places? Number two, Chair, please protect me, sir. Protect me, sir. Thank you. Secondly, sir, since 2013, after the Boko Haram attacks, my people went back home. Till date, the towns of Michka and Madagali is still cut off from national grid. They are still using candles in the two local governments in the 21st century. Our bridge also is still blown up, even though the contract was awarded in 2016. What is your plan, sir, to these places? Thank you.
You can address the questions.
Thank you, sir. The first question, I think the story of the Enugu-Awka road is true of all of the problems that we met. And I think the important thing first is that it may look expected, but it has not happened in a long time, that a government will inherit the projects of its preceding government and deal with them and own them as if they truly were our own. And it may seem ordinary, but it hasn't happened a lot, and that was what Mr. President required of all of his ministers. And so one of the problems on that road in context was that some of the contractors to whom it had been awarded had not discharged their obligations as and when due. Not because they were totally blameless, full of blame, because some of it must also come back to us. The issue we have spoken about, we budget 10 naira, we can only raise 3 naira. And if the contractor can't pay his staff, he can't lubricate his equipment, he can't order granite, laterite, bitumen, and pay his suppliers, he will shut down. Those were the realities. Now, there were also some problems, particularly at the 9th mile section. And there were issues that required us to investigate and ultimately change the design, because there were suspicions that there might have been some heavy deposits of coal underneath that place that was making it fail. So we have resolved all of those problems now. The most difficult section, if I remember, was the Amasia-Umuya section. I was there, and I think they were surfacing it in December, and I think I sent a team there. On the day I was supposed to go there, I couldn't get there because of bad weather, because I was to connect from Port Harcourt. And my team were there, and I think this was in May, and our contractors were still working. But trust me, once contractors run out of money, they will stop work. Contractors don't keep iron rod, they don't keep cement, they don't keep bitumen, they don't keep laterite, they don't keep gravel or asphalt. They order them when we pay them. So, and except for basic equipment that they need to run, they lay off staff too in order to manage their overhead and retain profitability. So that is the big elephant in the room of Nigeria's infrastructure. How do we fund that? And I think it's a matter all of us can benefit from each other's experience and learning. Distinguished Senator Abo, I am not the minister that was responsible for rail. It was under the Ministry of Transportation. But I recall what my colleague used to tell us at the time, that the cost of the rail from the southeast and south-south through to Maiduguri, which was within his contemplation always, was something he was very passionate about, was going to cost us multiples of billions of dollars. If I remember off the top of my head, we were looking, I think, about something like 12 or 21 billion dollars, and I don't want to be quoted on this, but there was a lot of money. And here we are, the money was supposed, the funding for the current one has come from the Chinese. We are looking to raise about $5 billion from the Chinese, from Mambila, and all that China has put during the FOCAC lending to the whole of Africa was just $60 billion for 53 countries. So, but it is a possibility, and I think the way to look at things is that something has started, and therefore, if we do one, we will do two. If we do two, we will get to 4, and get to 8, and get to 16. Michika and Madagali, I think the point I want to make here is that they are examples. What you feel, what your community feels, are strong reasons, strong examples of why we must all come together instead of beating drums of war. Because when war happens, this is what you see. In my interactions with the Army Corps of Engineers, because our contractors were leaving the place, they said they couldn't work there. So what we did was to call in the Army Corps of Engineers to come and take over these routes. And we then found out that it was even some of our own military who blew up the infrastructure as a strategy for containing terror. So when war breaks out, people are not, those who fight wars are not concerned about healthcare, well-being. Unfortunately, it is men, it is women and children who are the first victims. And then our infrastructure is destroyed. So you cannot recognize cities like Homs in Syria and Baghdad in Iraq anymore. They've been leveled by war. And what happens thereafter is a rebuilding process. And I think that it is important that all of us must learn from what happened in 1966, what it led to, and what followed after, a national reconstruction project. And I think that's what we have started with the Northeast Development Project. And I hope the lessons of the pain will endure and take us towards the path of brotherhood and peaceful coexistence. Thank you.
Distinguished Senators Oluremi Tinubu, Senator Adiola Solomon Olamelekon, and Senator Ezekiel Adebayo Oshinowo, you have your turns now.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I believe that on behalf of my colleagues, I know they are going to say something, to thank my distinguished colleagues for the support that our honorable ministers have enjoyed today, because I know what our colleagues can do. So I want to thank you, and I'm also a senator, and thank you for even telling us that we should take a bow at this point. So please, so I want to really thank you. And also, my only addition is that I remember that even your first tenure, I didn't get any chance to give employment letters to my constituents. So when you get there this time, just remember, senators here, we have people back home, our constituents, asking us for employment slots, and as senators, we don't, yes, it's qualified, definitely. So I want you to put that in your agenda for the second term, that we all need slots for employment for our constituents. I want to thank my distinguished colleagues again for the usual support. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Senator Olamelekon.
Mr. President of the Senate, sitting comfortably as the chairman, very distinguished colleague, let me say that it has been a very, very revealing and very, very good discussion between the Senate and the ministerial nominee. Mr. President, I want to believe that the ministerial nominee has taken in all questions and he has provided us adequate answers, telling us his capacity and the capability to perform. He has also made it known to us that despite our huge expectation, especially in the three critical sectors which he held in the last 4 years, he has said that the availability of funds has been a major challenge. He also has put together solutions going forward as to what can be done. And I believe with all of this that we have listened and we have heard from him, I want to seek the indulgence of the chair and the benevolence of my colleague that we allow the nominee to take a bow and go. Thank you.
Senator Oshino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me this privilege. I thank you. I thank my senior colleague, the ranking. I am almost fed up of ranking. Even in Turkey, you call us in a ranking order. So I must thank you for calling me at last. However, Mr. Chairman and distinguished colleagues, I'm happy to be here, and I'm fulfilled today to be part of you. The man, the nominees standing over there, is a man of honor. I'm sorry to say this. You know, even if you have a good product, you still need a little bit of advertisement. Because the more you do the you advertise, the more the merrier. The man standing there, he was governor of Lagos State. That is a known fact. It's a golden fish. The more you ask questions, you just want to make him to shy because it's a son. It's a son. It's a son with sound mind, so he can take care of the question. But where I'm going, the man is a lover of democracy. And why I must say this is because of past what he contributed in the last 8-9 years to the development of Lagos and Nigeria in general, and of course to the parliament. I will not forget so soon the issue of megacity in Lagos. Everybody all over the world, they are agitating, looking, planning for their state to be a megacity. And this is a state, it's a status. You don't buy it at mall. It's a status. You earn it. It is possible in Lagos, the megacity, because of the role it played. It's one of those who make things happen in Lagos. And that singular effort, I'm sorry, to measure a state as a megacity, it is not by your population, as you know. I'm sorry. You have to, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I believe there is no preferential treatment in this hall. If you can save others from emulation, I think you have to save me too. I'm saying this with, thank you, sir. I'm saying this with all assertion. Because for a state to be megacity, all of the state, all federal states in Nigeria want to have a megacity. It is being combined by your IDR, by your population, including the infrastructure. Without infrastructure, with your population IDR, they can't give you status of megacity. Now, where I'm going with this? Mr. Chair, where I'm going with this? We are not even any longer discussing megacity in Lagos. We have metamorphosed to the position of smart city, the like of Europe and Dubai. So, if this man can be a member of those who play that role, I think if there is anything worthy, you are a worthy person. He's a straightforward person, honest person, man of integrity, not only that, with uncommon transformation. And as a transformer, and I'm saying this with all assertion, as a transformer, he has established that, demonstrated that in Lagos and as a Minister of Federal Republic of Nigeria. On this note, I am not asking you, sir, to allow you to take a bow, but I am appealing, soliciting, that if you give him a soft landing, it's not going to make you, it's going to make you happy. You will not regret it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, you will agree with me that we have done justice and we could do even more, but time will not permit. I want to appeal to those who raise their hands but are not able to speak. We could still have interactions with him when he becomes an honorary minister, whether it's in works or elsewhere, because I'm sure most of us have issues coming from his sojourn as Minister of Power, Works and Housing. So I want to appeal to all of us that we should allow him to take a bow and go. But before I put that question, let me recognize our former colleagues seated there, Senator Benga Ashafa, Senator Obanikoro, Senator Mudashiru, who was also a member of the House with us, and of course, honorable members of the House who accompanied the nominee. I want to thank everyone for this. And Honorable Minister, I want to thank you for responding to the questions, but I think my mind is also agitated with the fact that we have to think deep and wide enough on how to fund our infrastructure. Borrowing is an option, but can we really look other ways to see if we can combine the borrowing with other mechanisms of funding so that we're able to create the infrastructure that we need for this country. With this, I put the question. Those in favor that the nominee takes a bow and go, say aye. Aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. You can take a bow.